Before Barbara leads us in our reading today, uh, I got a DM asking if Diane and I were in a different location. Now, when we first started doing these Zooms, it was not a whole lot of thought. We were just responding to the moment. So we've been in our family room um, all of this time. And so we're in a different room because Diane reclaimed the family room and pushed me back into another room. And Matt came over and did a lot of the work and a couple of other of our kids, a few other of our kids came over and helped to get the place in shape. So anyway, Barbara, we're ready for you.
Morning, everyone. I just want to say to Rosie, you've just been such a rock and an inspiration for all of us through these last few years, and we love you. The reading today, John's revelation aims at the possibility of a different world, one disentangled from the evils of empire that stalk and kill, where our sun mother and her children, our siblings, are in close connection to our earth mother.
Our journey began
Our
in the
journey
fertile
began in the
land
fertile
in
land
Genesis,
in Genesis
and it
and
ends with the
ends with
fertile
fertile
land
land
in the
in the
Revelation vision.
Revelation vision.
The tree of life stands in the middle of the great city. Its leaves and ceaseless harvest of fruit heal and nourish the nations.
It is an
It is
image
an
of
image of
sustainable
integration
of
of
urbanity and ecology.
ecology.
There's a river here, but this time it is of life, pouring from the throne of God. This image of wholeness, sustainability, and fertility is what leads us to nurture and care for our world through the divine feminine in us, like mothers, midwives, and doulas, spiritual and physical. We birth forth new life with our hands and with our hearts.
May we truly live
in
on earth as it is in heaven reality. The cosmic vision of anti-imperialistic spiritually flourishing. This is sacred belonging.
Ooh, amen.
And now we'll have announcements.
Thank you, Barbara. Today is Sunday, October 6, 2024. Welcome, everyone. And especially we're making this Rosie Day. Thank you, Rosie, for just being you. Today's voice is Dr. Karen Rice, and I am eagerly looking forward to this. We're going to have a very meaningful, thought-provoking message to us today. Thank you. As Jesus Collective is saving space for you this Wednesday, we meet every other Wednesday now. Before the 7 p.m. start, you can log in 10 minutes early for a short spiritual exercise and mindfulness. So if you want to tune in at 6:50 or slightly before that, you can do that and then have really great discussions following. I encourage, if you can make it, to just really do it. Really worth it. Whenever I can make it, I really appreciate being there. Now, we are our own sponsors. Thank you for noticing. Julia is putting connections, links in the chat for you, those who are giving. Pastor already thanked Dr. Dave for doing these past 2 weeks. I'm sure if you want to give today, we can link that in. But it was such a really wonderful gesture that he made. I encourage everyone that can take advantage. Now, on Sunday, October 27th, we're going to be meeting in person again. And I encourage everyone who can possibly make it to do so. If you can bring something, it's wonderful. We share. Doesn't have to be a lot. If you can't, there's always plenty for everybody. But the fellowship is what's really wonderful. The discussions that we sit and have, really relaxed atmosphere, getting to know each other, sharing. It's really a wonderful thing to take part in. So I encourage everyone that can do it to come and just be prepared to spend some extra time just hanging with us, sharing, having fun, laughing, whatever. Our quote for today comes from Ta-Nehisi Coates. I would like to know the number of Palestinians that are working at a major bureau for a major outlet, be that TV, newspaper, magazines. I would like to know the number of Palestinians specifically who are covering the West Bank, who are covering Israel, who are covering this conflict, as we call it. I'd like to know that. I don't necessarily need the numbers of anybody else. I need the numbers of Palestinians. What a thought-provoking question. Let us please keep these areas of the world right now in our prayers. I cannot imagine what it's like living there, dealing with the pain, the loss, the devastation. It's got to be mind-boggling. But let us keep on lifting them up to strengthen them, and definitely pray for divine intervention, because it seems that man's wisdom isn't working. So we'll now break into small groups, greet each other, and check in and see how we're going.
Hey, cariños.
Mother-in-law,
Mm-hmm.
and so we just decided to relocate to Solvang, and we brought him with us.
Oh,
I thought maybe
Yes.
you were going to come back to the west side, but guess not.
Well, we still have our home on
Oh, okay.
in Nolita in case we ever change our mind, but
Oh, okay. I thought you
for
were on the west
now,
side. Oh, okay.
no, my son lived on my son lived on the east side.
Oh, okay.
But
Yeah, okay, well, nice.
yeah, having grown up in this area, my husband and I were looking for just more space.
Yeah.
More space, especially
We
with
love
my
it out there in the
father-in-law.
valley. Yeah,
Yes,
it's really nice.
you should come up and visit anytime.
We'd
You
love
have a
that.
home here.
We're big
Yeah.
whiners, so we go up there quite a bit.
Oh, yeah. Our closest winery is about a mile, less than a mile away.
Oh, fun.
So we were just there on Thursday because, why not?
Yeah.
So it's been really nice, but during the day it's really hot. So this weekend's been really, really hot. We went to powwow yesterday, and we
Oh, I heard about that.
yeah,
Yeah.
we could only stay for 90 minutes because it
Oh.
was rough. It was rough.
Yeah, it's hot. Yeah.
But there's a lot to explore here, and it's just taken a while to there's just a lot going on in my family.
Yeah, are you
So-
working out there? Is family kind of a full-time care thing right now?
No, well, it's almost a full-time job, but it's not my full-time job. So
Yeah.
I was here with the Solving School District on a 2-year
Okay.
contract,
Uh-huh.
and that ended in July. So I get to work with the California Association for Bilingual Education, and I get
Okay.
to provide technical assistance to districts and schools across California. So
Cool.
yeah, so it's been nice, but I'm so happy to be back.
Yeah.
Hasn't been a good Sunday between moves, the big
I hear
moving
ya.
is really, really challenging.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, but we're back, and it's good to see you all again.
Yes.
Yes.
Matt, you got married.
Did, yeah, last May out in the valley actually. So
Oh, you
or
did.
last
Oh.
yeah, last May. Yeah, so it was, yeah, very fun, very special, we love it. Yeah.
Aw, awesome.
To this lovely woman.
Well, you both are very lucky to have each other.
Yeah, I am.
I agree.
Aw,
Aw.
yeah.
Thanks, Dee.
Yeah. Aw, well, I'm glad Diane's doing well. I was following that in the updates in the emails. So I'm glad, Diane, that you're well.
Thank you, Maria. Yeah.
Yeah. And Matt, did you go on a honeymoon yet?
We went to Fiji.
Ooh, beach.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Go big or go home.
Yeah.
That's kind of, well, we were thinking of doing Tahiti or the Bora Bora thing, but for the same price, you can go to Fiji and get 2 extra days. So we decided to do that.
Oh,
And we did one of the Costco deals. They actually have really good
oh,
deals on
good
there.
to know. Good to
Vacation
know.
things. So,
Good
yeah.
to know. Welcome back, everybody. Yeah, so our friend Karen, whom I just happened to see yesterday, which is a whole other story, unexpectedly. But anyway, in her own words, Dr. Karen Rice grew up. She grew up white, conservative, extremely Christian, and homeschooled in the Midwest.
Wow.
And now she's one of those queer progressive activists Fox News warned you about. There's a clip of Karen blocking the car of Trump's education secretary, Betsy DeVos, that really did circulate on Fox News back in 2017. Oh, my goodness. 2017. Anyway, January 2017. Her journey means that Karen has at one point held most of the views that she now understands to be distorted or harmful. And that evolution means that she feels both the urgency and the possibility of moral transformation. It is a gift to be invited to become more aligned, loving, and liberated version of yourself in relationship with others. And the Christian tradition offers us both resources and many cautionary tales in the process. And I saw Karen, I mean, we've crossed paths multiple times. She's been over our house maybe a couple of years ago now. And we were at a PFLAG. She was a presenter at a PFLAG. PFLAG used to stand for Parents of Lesbians and Gays. And anyway, they don't actually use it for that because they're more inclusive of people of different genders and whatnot. So anyway, we were at a meeting and I just told Karen, I said, why haven't we had you before? You just, I mean, you are rich, I'm not talking financially. I think she knows that at all, but you are rich, and we need to experience you. So, um, everybody, can you give a warm applause and welcome to Karen Rice? Yeah.
Thank you so much for having me, friends. I've been to y'all's in-person service a few times and just felt so, to use David's word, enriched when I have been there with you. And just a quick plug for PFLAG, since Pastor David brought it up. PFLAG, I'm on the board. So the way that we support queer and trans folks is by supporting the people around them. So we offer support groups and education and connection for family and friends who want to love the queer and trans people in their life well, but are struggling with how, or are feeling that it's a stress or a burden on them. We want to support the people there so that they can love the people in their life more deeply. So that's just a pitch for PFLAG. Let me know if you want any more information. It's a great joy of mine to love queer and trans people indirectly by loving the people around them. Yeah, it's just a joy to be with you all this morning. It's a joy to be with you because I know that you're a community that can hold the joys and the losses, the sorrows, the challenges already, just in the ways that you've spoken to and about each other. I know this. And really, sorry, I should have started with this, just a visual description of myself. I'm a white woman with short, dark hair. I am wearing a maroon button-down polo and a kufiya, black and white kufiya scarf in solidarity with Palestine. In my background, there are two guiding figures for me. One is a framed picture of Alok Ved Menon, who is a non-binary poet and leader. And on my left is a framed quote from the Pirkei Avot, which is rabbinical scripture. And it says, "Do not be daunted by the enormity of the world's grief. You are not obligated to complete the work, but neither are you free to abandon it." And that has been, since around 2016 was the first time I learned from that writing. It's been a grounding point for me, and it informs me today as I hold in my body and in my heart and in my mind that we are almost 1 year into the genocide of people in Gaza. Of course, over 75 years into the genocide, the Nakba, of displacement and theft and murder of Palestinians. That's why I'm grateful to be with you all this morning, people who can hold grief and anger and joy and connection. And so as we are a year into this current expression of genocide, I encourage myself and I encourage you to not be daunted by the enormity of the world's grief, but together continue to engage with what is in front of us to do. So as my little bio said, I have changed a lot over the course of my life. I grew up in the Midwest. I am white. I grew up in a very, very conservative church in many ways. I grew up, just a little taste, so you get a little contrast. The only way I ever learned about evolution was in order to disprove that it happened. That was my science curriculum that I was taught in my homeschool training. My first protest action was with my mom, my parents. We were in a little, I think it was a 4th of July parade we were watching. And then the Planned Parenthood float came by, and my mom had us stand up and turn our backs on the float to show that we were not in support of what they did. It was a scary, felt nervous. And now there's so much that I carry with me from that time. I am grateful my mom exposed me to forms of protest. I now choose to exert them in pursuit of a different justice that looks very different than it used to. I came from a background where only married men were allowed to be in leadership of the church. I have changed and grown into an appreciation of how much we have to learn from people of all genders, and in particular, the wisdom of trans folks, right? So in my life, I have had the opportunity, the obligation to change in many ways and to grow and become a fuller, more liberated version of myself in community with others. But I will still hold some things from my past, which is to say that you will get a 3-point talk today. The points don't alliterate because, one can't hold on to so many things. But here are my 3 points of conversation today. And they're all about change and evolution within ourselves as individuals and as communities. So my points are that it is a gift to change. It is an opportunity to change. It is a choice that requires work to change, to evolve. And finally, it is a responsibility that we individually and collectively hold to change into the most aligned and liberated and effective versions of ourselves. So the call to change, to evolve, to become is a gift, it's a choice, and it's a responsibility. So those are my 3 points, and then you'll know when I'm done because I will have hit all of those points. To frame, already the readings that we've talked about and that have been mentioned already call us into a framework of how we can change and evolve and become. But I want to spend a few moments reading a poem that has been really grounding for me in the last year, since October 7th of last year. And it's by movement elder and poet Aurora Levins Morales. And the poem is called Vahavta. And let me just read it. It'll take maybe 2 minutes or so. I invite you to notice the kind of change collectively that she is calling us to. Vahavta by Aurora Levins Morales. Say these words when you lie down and when you rise up, when you go out and when you return, in times of mourning and in times of joy. Inscribe them on your doorposts, embroider them on your garments, tattoo them on your shoulders. Teach them to your children, your neighbors, your enemies. Recite them in your sleep here in the cruel shadow of empire. Another world is possible. Thus spoke the prophet Roki Dalton. Altogether, they have more death than we, but altogether, we have more life than they. There is more bloody death in their hands than we could ever wield, unless we lay down our souls to become them, and then we will lose everything. So instead, imagine winning. This is your sacred task. This is your power. Imagine every detail of winning, the exact smell of the summer streets in which no one has been shot, the muscles you have never unclenched from worry, gone soft as newborn skin, the sparkling taste of food when we know that no one on earth is hungry, that the beggars are fed, that the old man under the bridge and the woman wrapping herself in thin sheets in the back seat of a car, and the children who suck on stones, nest under a flock of roofs that keep multiplying their shelter. Lean with all your being towards that day when the poor of the world shake down a rain of good fortune out of the heavy clouds, and justice rolls down like waters. Defend the world in which we win as if it were your child. It is your child. Defend it as if it were your lover. It is your lover. When you inhale and when you exhale, breathe the possibility of another world into the 37.2 trillion cells of your body until it shines with hope. Then imagine more. Imagine rape is unimaginable. Imagine war is a scarcely credible rumor. Let the crimes of our age, the grotesque inhumanities of greed, the sheer and astounding shamelessness of it, the vast fortunes made by stealing lives, the horrible normalcy it came to have, is unimaginable to our heirs, the generations of the free. Don't waver. Don't let despair sink its sharp teeth into the throat with which you sing. Escalate your dreams. Make them burn so fiercely that you can follow them down any dark alleyway of history and not lose your way. Make them burn clear as a starry drinking gourd over the grim fog of exhaustion, and keep walking. Hold hands, share water, keep imagining, so that we and the children of our children's children may live. May it be so. Another world is possible. Another version of ourselves is possible. And this invitation to change and become is always available to us. But sometimes it feels more pressing than others. I shared a little bit with y'all about the ways I have changed from when I was a child and teen. But I've changed so much in the last year. Before October 7th of last year, I thought that Palestinians, their lives, their dreams, were distant from me. I thought it was too complicated for me to show solidarity with children being starved. I thought my government, at least to some degree, listened to its constituents when they demanded that we spend our money on education and things at home that we deeply need and deserve, rather than more weapons. I have learned a lot in the last year. I have become a new version of myself, not better, but deeper and more aligned with who I want to be. And I invite you, whether it is a year of genocide or a personal grief or an opportunity showing up for you, I invite you to notice the possibilities of change and becoming that are ahead of you. Another world is possible together. Another becoming of ourselves is possible. And so, let me get to my 3 points. First, it is a gift to be invited into change and becoming. For myself, as someone prone to white guilt and defensiveness, as someone who is a highly sensitive person,
Oh, hopefully the internet will catch up with Karen, unless she was disconnected. I don't know if you hear us, Karen, but you might need to log out and log back in. Yeah.
It looks like the plug thing, like something else unplugged.
Still no Karen. Hmm. How you doing, Tanya? That came out of nowhere.
I'm good, recovering from our trip, and I think I needed the week to get my head back on. I mean, do you ever get in the mode where you're on vacation and everybody else feeds you, and then you have to come home, and all of a sudden you have to take care of yourself? Yeah, I'm spoiled.
Keep your joy. Right?
Yes, yes. How are you doing?
We are doing well. We had colds, but we
Oh.
shared them, and we shared them with each other, and now we're getting better.
Oh, the deepness of love. Yes. Was it traumatic? Was it traumatic leaving your room?
It's growing on me. I'm growing on it, I guess.
I'm sorry, y'all. Our internet is inconsistent. I apologize.
Here you go. Well, we figured you'd figure something out.
Yes, my apologies, but it is good to be back with you. And I'm sorry to interrupt the conversation that is deeply valuable as well. But I'll just continue. I'll backtrack just a minute and say, I can get really defensive about being called into becoming, but in fact, that it's a gift. And so my PhD is in philosophy, and so let me just bring in a little bit of nerdery and say that there is at least two different stances we sometimes take in engaging with one another. And one is called the observer stance. And this is all from a philosopher named Strawson. But one is called the observer stance. It's when you kind of treat people like an object, something to be managed. Oh, that person, they never listen when I talk, so maybe I'll get that person to talk to them, and you manage them like they're sort of a weather phenomenon. How do I navigate this without engaging them? There's also the participant stance. And it's when you treat someone like a moral being, a person with capacity to hear and change. And so I would just say then, when someone comes to you, if they come to you to say that what you've done something that is harmful or misguided, that is a gift. They are also saying in the subtext, they're also saying, I believe you have the capacity to change. I believe you care about doing the right thing. I believe that you want to become the fullest and most beautiful and liberated version of yourself. What a gift it is to be approached that way, whether by an individual or by just the state of the world. I hope we can have a confidence and a belief in ourselves that we can rise to the occasion to become what is called on us. The second point is that so it's a gift to be invited to change. It is also a choice to be invited to change. It's a choice to actually make the change. And what do I mean by this? I think one of the things I learned from this past year of genocide is that there is no magic red line that will break through to some people, that will break through to our decision makers. And just a bit of a trigger warning, take care of yourself. But if the dead body of a child with their face blown off in the arms of their parent doesn't stop the world, stop giving weapons to do that again, nothing will, except our choice to change the world, to create another world. But the sheer badness of, say, climate change, of a hurricane hitting, the sheer badness or harm that occurs doesn't magically make it stop. We get to make the choice to change and become and create a different world. And so the same thing is true on the personal level. Just seeing that there is an injustice also requires us to start to take action so that the moral awakening we've had turns into action, turns into a practice of solidarity. And the final point is that becoming, that change is a responsibility. It's not just that it is good for us to stop oppressing people, because it is better for an oppressor. It is morally better for us to move away from our oppression. It's good for us, to be sure. Guess who it's better for? The people we are oppressing. It is much better for them that we do that, and we owe it to them. We owe it to the people who are harmed by our apathy. And so it is a gift, it is an opportunity. It is a choice, and it is a responsibility we have to be growing into a liberated and true version of ourselves individually, ourselves as a community, and ourselves as a society. I have changed so much in the past year, and I have so much more becoming to do. And I'm grateful for a community like yours, where each of you are on a journey of becoming that will liberate yourselves and create the other world that is possible. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. Appreciate that. Sarah and I are going to lead the discussion here and open it up to other people in just a minute. But I want to say that I admire you so much, and have seen you from up close be somebody that has embodied that change in all the ways that you're naming. And just still from more of afar, watching you embrace that change that you're speaking of in this past year of being a light for others to come into understanding the liberation of Palestinians, understanding their connectedness to it and how they can act and still be a part of it in such a participatory way. So your naming of the participation versus observer standpoints is just, it's so valid. And so we do it out of such a protective mechanism to just observe, to objectify, and, Paulo Freire says we got to dive into the subjective. And so that participatory aspect is so important for us to really see ourselves as a part of the collective liberation. So just thank you for pushing into that more and more. Like you've never given up on that. And that's just, I don't know. I think that's one of the most beautiful things. So,
thank you, Matt. It really means a lot to me. I really appreciate that.
Yeah. Yeah. I think for me, as you acknowledge, a lot of the folks here come from a background of like believing in this liberation and having this liberation. How do we, and we come up against people that are in that observer stance and maybe in that more objective kind of idea. And I know you've engaged a lot of those folks also. And we want to, we see ourselves as part of making the change, as engaging those objectively minded folks and kind of moving them into more of the participatory ways. What ways can you maybe give us some tips of what that looks like for you?
Is this a question for me
And then I'll open it up to other people.
Great, thanks.
Yeah.
Gosh, Matt, that has been I actually think it's a calling on my life, whether it's my profession or not, to be in relationship with people who have good hearts and have a lot of beliefs and fears that are holding them back from living out and becoming a version of themselves. So I think one thing I would say, if you have folks in your life who sort of, have this sense of like, oh yeah, it seems pretty bad over there. This seems like someone should do something. Or people who divide between the spiritual and the activist or justice oriented. One of them, I would say, share your story is a meaningful way to connect with them. And the story that I shared, the truth that I share for myself is that some of the most deeply spiritually transformative experiences I've ever had have been in activism, have been putting my feet on the ground, putting my body together with other people who care about this and taking the actions that are in front of us to take. And so I would say, if you're speaking with someone who maybe really wants to separate the spiritual and the practical and thus not take action, I would just invite them into activism as a spiritual practice and share a time. And just a little short example is the UCSB Palestine Solidarity Encampment, which was a complicated space of attempting and succeeding to different degrees of creating liberation. But I did the safety team shift 5 days a week from 5 a.m. to 8 a.m. I just stood and walked around a quiet set of tents and watched the sunrise every day for several weeks, caring for a community as they put their bodies on the line. That level of sort of mother hen attentiveness over a space is an image that is used in the Bible for God. And I felt, even to your earlier point, Matt, about the image of God in me, I felt that I was expressing an image of God more clearly and brightly within myself in that activism, that nitty-gritty mundane activism was a spiritual experience. And so for people in your life, that might, if you have a story of that, that can be a meaningful way to invite them away from mere observation.
Thank you.
No, I was just going to add to that and open it up to other people too, because I think it's probably just being aware of the anniversary of October 7th. You know, it's been it's hard to believe it's been a year, but also I think there's a lot of fatigue that comes at this point of either trying to keep on top of what's happening, how to feel about it, how to be involved, how to participate. And I think it can be easy for people to either emotionally fatigue or maybe fatigue in participating in a way that makes a difference. I think that example you just shared is a really great way to remember that big change comes through small steps and, you know, individual actions. So I think we can open it up and let other people ask you questions or share some examples that may be encouraging along the lines of what you shared. Thank you, Rick. Thank you, Karen.
Anybody with some raise your hands? Oh, yeah, let me get to, there we go.
Tanya has her hand up.
Tanya, what's up?
I just wanted to with my hand. There was a couple of things that you said that I've really resonated with me. One was the way you said that there was no red line for people that make decisions, and I think that I immediately thought of gun control. And when I saw that a person could put a gun in the face of a first grader, it still makes me emotional. That was like a piece of me kind of died. I mean, it was just, so I think that the way you said that was so cool. The other thing is my brother sent me a video a while ago about the Democrats and Republicans and how kind of they're different. And, you know, Republicans embrace change, love change. I mean, this is kind of paraphrasing what I got out of it. And then Republicans are really fearful of change and really struggle with change. And so I think that you are really uniquely qualified, being as you kind of lived both of those lives, to kind of speak to that. I think I get kind of hopeless when I think about that because you know, I live around people who do have fear of change and really struggle with that, and I'm just kind of not quite sure what to do with it because it's just so, I feel like it's just so opposite. So I don't know if you could speak to that or kind of give examples of how you live that.
That's a beautiful, thank you for those reflections. And I agree with you on gun violence. When it was like white, like relatively affluent area, like kindergartners who were killed, and that didn't do the automatic work of changing gun laws, that to me also felt like a real moment of clarity and points to, and I feel the hopelessness, but it also points to like the world as it is has no automatic red lines. The world that we create together can and will, and what it looks like will look different. In terms of talking to folks who are afraid of change, because I think that's an important piece of there's a deep, and I think this does, certainly cross party lines, and there's also some parties who really encourage certain things and others who don't. So who draw on that fear of change. I wonder, number one, if there are things you do have in common with those folks, values you have in common, that to me is sort of where I start, because even if the expression of those values looks really different. So I'll be short, but my dad, my dear father, who I love very much, who is a medical missionary, which the missionary part is complicated, but to the Democratic Republic of the Congo, who sacrifices of himself for the good of others. He also got sucked into this right-wing thing and has voted for Trump. And it's that incongruence of who I feel I know him to be to the choices he's making that in some ways is really frustrating, but in other ways is an opening. Because I can honestly say, Dad, I love you, and I have learned so much from you about caring for other people and caring about injustice. Can you help me understand how that leads you to this political choice? And actually listen to him. I can't honestly say I'm willing to have my mind changed, but to listen to him and then to say to him, I think I share the value you taught me. Here's how it looks to me. Here's how it leads me to my choices. But if there's any shared values, any shared commitments, that's often a place I start with folks. And also to Matt's piece about observing versus action, sometimes I don't try to convince people whose minds are totally the opposite. What about the people in your life who agree on what should happen, but struggle to take action on it? Those might be the folks that it's a really productive conversation to say, what's holding you back from action? Because I know we agree on not just this value, but what we should do about it. Can you help me understand what's holding you back? And come with me next time I try this action. So that might be just switching targets a little bit, and then also starting with what is shared values.
Let's see. Anybody? Here we go.
David, you have your hand up.
Yeah. Karen, when you said, you talked about the spirituality of activism.
Yeah.
I think about that and feel it and experience it quite a bit, and I think of Andre Henry, who a friend who 2-3 years ago posted on Facebook, I think I found my church, and it was in downtown LA with thousands of other people. But an image came to mind when you said that, and it's from yesterday. You and I, and Ana Rosa's on here too. She was there. I don't know who else might have been there, but we were in front of Ventura City Hall for a rally. And then we marched around downtown with, a crowd of people. And then we came back to City Hall, and I didn't know this was part of the program. I knew there would be speeches and whatnot, but they brought out piñata with Netanyahu's face on it, with little horns at the top. And at first, I kind of slightly recoiled because I thought, I'm not really into violence. You know what I mean? But they invited Palestinians who were there to come up and strike this piñata. So a couple of people went up, and then this elderly woman who, to me, was probably in her 80s, she started striking this piñata with a smile on her face, and she wouldn't stop. She kept beating and beating Netanyahu until his arm came off. She just kept beating him, and never without a smile the whole time. And someone had to come and stop her so other people would get a chance. And even when they were putting their arm around her, she was swinging. She was wailing away at this. And something about the smile on her face was cathartic for me, standing in the crowd. What were your impressions in that moment?
Well, I want to raise that Onarosa put in the chat that was the best that was the best. I felt so I felt a rush of many different emotions, and I was grateful for the opportunity to sit with those because at first I thought it felt a little goofy, like, okay, we had this powerful series of speeches, marching, and if you haven't, just I'm sure in your community everyone has, but if y'all haven't been to a protest, just is as there is power in collective singing, like when y'all are all together in person and so many spiritual communities, collective singing is powerfully binding. So also is collective chanting and shouting. So if, I'm sure you all have, but that's a deeply spiritual experience for me. And so then to go from that to beating a piñata, I felt complicated. It felt a little silly, like a little like, oh, is this a party thing, but also violent?
Right.
But I agree that when I think about like whose violence am I was grateful for that a little bit of discomfort because whose violence am I comfortable with? Like it's a piñata made out of cardboard. She can do whatever she wants to. Those Palestinian folks can do whatever they want to that cardboard cutout. And nothing would even come close to comparing to violence actual done to their kin. And so I was grateful for that experience of a little bit of discomfort, of awkwardness, because it helped me remember the vast gulf between what oppressed and people who are having a genocide committed against them, between what they are doing and how strongly they can push back, and the vast violence of empire, U.S. and Israeli, arrayed against them. So complicated, but grateful for the contrast it let me recognize.
Thank you.
Barbara also said in the chat that there's a protest in Santa Maria from 4 to 5 every week. Find the details in the chat if y'all are up in North County. There's stuff going on in there too. And Onarosa would like to say something also. Go ahead.
I think part of this is also cultural because as someone who grew up Mexican, like the piñata is the pinnacle of the party. So I feel like it made sense to me that was the crescendo. And also like, yeah, how come we've tricked everyone to think that it's not okay to push back? You know, like I feel like anyone who's uncomfortable with that, it's because they have like just absorbed all the messages that capitalism have told us about who's worthy of pushing back and who's not. So I just wanted to share that.
Yeah, thank you for that, Onarosa, and giving me the cultural context that I missed. Appreciate you.
We got Roy and Cheryl coming in. What do you have for us?
Yeah, it's Roy. Oh boy, the conflation in our broader society of anti-Semitism, pro-Hamas, and anti-genocide just breaks my heart. And you know, when you described the piñata, David, the first thing that jumped out at me is from the Middle Ages, when there was a widespread belief that Jews had horns. And all of the anti-Semitic paintings, drawings, whatever, from the Middle Ages, all included Jews with horns. And the need for care when we rightly speak and protest, you know. So my immediate reaction to that, David, wasn't the same as yours. I can understand someone wanting to hit a piñata of Netanyahu. I kept, you know, the piece of that always comes back to me is the Bruce Cockburn song, "If I Had a Rocket Launcher." But the piece that really grabbed me was the fact that the piñata had horns, and how careful we need be that we not open the door for that conflation. So someone can say, oh, you're anti-Semitic, and thereby not have to wrestle with the fact that, no, we're not anti-Semitic. Indeed, the Palestinians are Semites too, but that we are anti-Israeli government, and how important it is that we not leave those doors there for people to escape from our reasonable and right protests.
Can I say something? And isn't it interesting to me that it always comes back exactly to that anti-Semitism, right? And that anything is labeled now anti-Semitic in reference to, Israelis that are completely, pro what they are doing to Gaza and the other people around them. But it's never, they can talk all the shit they want to talk about everybody else. Every person of color here knows that historically also our peoples have been demonized as well historically. Who has been writing those histories? Who has been writing those books and articles and creating the pictures with the horns or the quote unquote devil tongues and so on and so forth? If it has not been those in the power, with the power to label all of us in those various different forms and ways. So I always question that as well. When people are anti-Semitic, don't give me that about anti-Semitic. I'm really battling internally right now because for years, I had really believed in an organization, Jews for Christianity. Okay. And
probably
okay.
Jews for Jesus.
There you go. Jews for Jesus. That's the one. And I, so they have continued to send me tons of information throughout this whole entire year that this genocide has been taking place. And it's really upsetting to me because I've even like called the various numbers and emailed, don't send me this information when you're not willing to look at our Palestinian brothers and sisters as brothers and sisters as well. And you just want to keep this superiority, complex about you and screw everybody else who does not agree with you. I'm not for that at all whatsoever. And it's just conflicting spiritually inside of me because I'm like, this is not right. This is, to me, this is not of God, but it really does upset me. I drove by the protest yesterday in various ways because, the walking for me is, it would have been crazy, but honking my horn and yelling out, Palestina libre, and I wasted some gas there. So yes, I was happy to see that, I think there's just a lot of different ways that we can interpret this and not always just like having to have this so-called fear of like, we don't want to get misinterpreted. No, let's open that dialogue. Let's open that dialogue, let's, change like the sister was sharing, and I'm very grateful for. Thank you.
Well, Rosie, we can
Rosie,
always
I-
count on you on keeping it a stack. So, thank you. And
Rosie, let me respond to Rosie. I think I want to make sure I was clear. My argument, Rosie, is that I agree with everything you said. And I just want to be in a position where I'm not feeding the ability to call me anti-Semitic. I don't want to use tropes that point in that direction, and therefore make it easy for some Zionists to say, oh, well, you're just anti-Semitic. And I want to be able to say, no, I'm not. I'm not anti-Semitic. I'm anti-Israeli government. I'm anti-genocide. I'm, those pieces are very clear, but I'm also not pro-Hamas. What they did, in my opinion, was more understandable, but equally heinous. But I don't want to leave that door open where someone can turn their back on my argument against genocide by just saying, oh, well, he's just anti-Semitic, so what he's saying has no moral validity. And I want to be able to say, no, I'm not anti-Semitic, and I'm not conflating all of those things together. That's where I was coming from.
yeah, thanks, Roy. I think not to keep it going as a back and forth because we got to wrap it up here, but I just want to see what I'm hearing in both of your points. And one, it's there's this oppressor state that has used tropes and stereotypes and images for the oppression of others, and you want to make sure that we don't fall into that. And at the other end, a Palestinian utilizing a piñata as a form of protest. It's not us in a position of high power, high privilege, as participants of the domination system that are doing that, are participating in that. Yes, we are there observing and have discomfort in that observation. Again, that observer participant spectrum that Dr. Karen Rice talked about. So where does that put us? But I think there's something there as there's something redemptive about a Palestinian do it because they're doing it from the perspective of the oppressed. And so there is a dynamic there that is taking place when we see it, as the tropes and the stereotypes that have taken place are no longer present in that dynamic because it's done from the underside. So it's now theater. So instead of a power over or domination system being duplicated, replicated. So I think that's what I hear in both of your points, and just wanting to make that clear for if anybody else has anything to finally say. I'm going to pass it to Pastor David.
Lisa and Barbara have their
Oh,
hands
snap.
up.
We got all right. We got some people stacked up. All right. Lisa, why don't you go first?
I wanted to thank you, Karen. I loved the conversation you had with your dad, and I could really relate to that. I've had conversations like that where I've not started them, but the person who's pro-Trump started them. And so all I do is ask questions and they get defensive because they can't answer. When I ask them, okay, well, where'd you get this information? I'll just ask something like that. I'm like, okay, well, convince me, provide me with this. And then they get angry and then they shift the conversation. And so, but the important thing I feel is sowing those seeds like you did with your dad, and the fact that you were able to present your information. I'm so grateful because so many times that is not always the opportunity. And so I just wanted to encourage everybody to keep sowing those seeds, because the important thing is sowing those seeds, because like we all know, teachers make sure students hear something 3 times because then they remember it. And that's exactly how we've come to this point, is because these people have heard the lies over and over. You saw Vance, he was pulling the same stunt on the debate where he would say the lies over and over. And so he wanted them to hear it so many times where they start to either doubt themselves or believe the lie. And so I just wanted to encourage everybody to keep those conversations within your group, within your interaction group, within the people that your next door neighbors, the ones you talk to on a daily basis, because that's the best way to combat misinformation. So anyway, thank you so much. So many of the other things you said were just so powerful and resonated, but I just wanted to share that with you. Thank you for being here.
Hi, I just, mine will take like 30 seconds. I just wanted to say, because it's not a question, but I just wanted to make a comment that in a year that has been so incredibly painful, your talk was incredibly just inspirational and so positive. And I just loved the way that you asked us to reflect even how that we have personally changed in the last year, and also like taking action. But just thank you so much. Really.
Can I just quickly say that it's those things that are uncomfortable, the visual things that are uncomfortable, the conversations that are uncomfortable, when that opens up and someone approaches you or they're talking to you, it allows you to speak to it. It allows you to be able to share your truth. It allows you to be able to help them see maybe their thoughts are conflicting with God, with Jesus, with life. So I just think it's good, even though it doesn't feel good, it's uncomfortable, but that's okay. It's hard, but it's okay. And I know I have a hard time sometimes. I mean, I've stood with LGBTQ, and I've stood with, and in pride. I've just gone to them when the teens were protesting guns. I just go there. It's uncomfortable, but I hope someone asks me, "What are you doing here? Aren't you a Christian?" Back when I was just hoping they would ask me so we could talk. Anyway, I just want.
Yeah, thank you for that, Shella. Like that's important. We can go into the status quo breaking areas, and that's important for us to be in those liminal spaces. That's deeply spiritual. We need to bring the spirit to the activism, and that's what you're talking about there. So, and that's what Dr. Rice is trying to point us to as well in their work. Yeah, I just want to say thank you to Karen one more time. Just so much I admire of your work and your practice and being the activist that I hope I can be someday. And so we're just so much, our community is grateful for your presence here today.
And now Roy's going to lead us in communion.
Every time I lead communion, I talk about this being a time of metaphor. And as Karen was sharing today, I was struck by a piece of this metaphor. Often we who are Christians see the crucifixion and resurrection of Jesus as being a completed act, that in that larger event, that somehow God completed something. And I'm struck today from Karen's words that it is not a completed act. And that in sharing communion, we are committing ourselves to continued engagement in the work of God in bringing about redemption and wholeness. As I hear of this event yesterday, I'm touched by our obligation to continue the work in justice and hope for the Palestinian people. So, as we take the bread and break it, I am reminded of Jesus' body broken for us, of that act on God's behalf to go that far in bringing about redemption. Take the bread and eat it as a commitment to being part of God's program. After supper, Jesus took the cup and said, essentially, I am poured out for you. Pour yourselves out for others. Take this cup as continuing commitment to be poured out in God's work of justice and wholeness for the world. And so we are reminded yet again, do not be daunted by the enormity of the world's grief. Do justly now, love mercy now, walk humbly now. You are not obligated to complete the work, but neither are you free to abandon it. Amen.
Thank you.